It has been tough. And fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, for me personally, the first week or two took the wind out of my sails. And then, unfortunately or fortunately, I am a deep person of faith. And all the garbage that went flying just empowered me. I am at heart a pathological optimist that has a profound trust in God, and that somehow, in the midst of all this insanity, we are going to create life in new and amazing ways. Like it or not, this current blizzard has provided a podium for us to talk about the lived experience, the reality of trans people as we have never before had the opportunity. And our challenge right now is, how do we use this opportunity and look to the possibilities? With the limited time that I have, I really would like to talk for the next 3 hours. I want to reflect on just a few facts about transgender people, and then talk a little more about faith and how it guides and leads the community that I'm so blessed to be fortunate to lead. At least I live with that fantasy that I lead. A couple of facts. Number one, transgender people have been here since the beginning of recorded history. We have always been here. We will continue to be here. We will be here in the future, despite what the world around us may say. In fact, about 1% of the population is transgender. Now, at first glance, you may say, well, that's not many people. No, but in Brown County, that amounts to 2,750 transgender people. And that doesn't include the intersexed, who are also part of our transgender diverse community, which is another 1.7% of the population. So in Brown County, there's easily 5,000 to 6,000 gender diverse people. No executive order is going to wipe that out. It may cause us to be a little more cautious. It may cause some of us to crawl back into our closets. But hopefully, and I'm seeing that, it may also embolden more of us to step out and to help this crazy world realize we're here, we're not going anywhere. We are part of God's amazing creation. We didn't choose to be transgender. I know many in public life will say, well, you know, you can't choose your gender. Well, they're right. No trans person I know, including myself, ever chose to be transgender. It's who I am. It's kind of like, how many here are left-handed? Okay? And when did you choose to be left-handed? Can you be right-handed? Yeah, but it doesn't fit. It isn't comfortable. It doesn't make sense to our being. Some of us are ambidextrous. I'm ambigenderist. I spent years of my life in my male side, living in a closet, living in fear. Where I worked, I would have been fired immediately if they knew about Martha. Throughout that journey, and it was quite a journey, I spent time with counselors, therapists. One point I made an 8-day silent retreat. Thought I would die. But only and always in my conversation with my God was, why did you make me this way? And somehow deep in the core of my being, God always answered with a kind of a smile and kind of the message of, trust me, I know what I'm doing. And I did, and I stayed hidden. But then when I retired 7 years ago, and there was no longer the fear of my loss of employment and care for my wife, kids, etc., I broke free. And now Martha is out and about, and look out world. Most of us know, we learned in high school that there are XX and XY chromosomes, and that's what determines maleness or femaleness. Well, that's what we learned in high school. If we went to a college class or looked deeper, or if you talked with an endocrinologist or a geneticist, there's at least 16 different combinations of chromosomes. And some geneticists look as many as 64. Our God loves diversity. Our God is not black and white. Our God is a God that's alive on the edges of life and calls us to the fullness of the unique life that God has presented to each and every one of us. There are no, quote, cures for being transgender. Things like conversion therapy that you may have heard of only does more damage than good. Many significant religions, organized religions, have promoted conversion therapy. Most have failed miserably. And many have come to the enlightenment, the realization that people in our medical professions, our mental health professions, came to years ago, that it's a natural part of being human. It's not for everyone. I've struggled with my God, wondering about why did I get this unique gift. At this point in my life, I'm beginning to see why. Because I've been given opportunities to walk with hundreds, thousands of transgender people. Transgender people are some of the most spiritual people you will ever meet, because they spend years soul searching to try to understand, what's called gender dysphoria and why it doesn't mesh with the culture, with the world around us. And when they come to that point where they can embrace their authentic selves, when they experience that rush of trans joy, amazing things happen. They come alive. You've probably heard that there is this horrible thing called gender affirming care. And you've probably heard there's especially one group, the American College of Pediatricians. Sounds like a very profound group. And it's a group of 1,200 fairly traditional conservative pediatricians who are against gender affirming care. And in the media, all too often, that's the group that's held up. Personally, and for all of us, and I would welcome all of you, instead embrace the wisdom of the American Medical Association with its 156,000 members who have embraced and affirmed the critical role of gender affirming care in helping especially youth deal with self-esteem, mental health, depression, suicidality. I know trans people who desperately need a community of support, and when they find it, they proclaim loudly thanks to God because they will tell you they probably wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for that community of faith and support that they've encountered. Decisions regarding gender-affirming care, instead of being in the hands of politicians, should be in the hands of parents, working with their doctors, working with medical professionals. It is mind-boggling to me, some of the bills, some of the legislation that has been put forward. Fortunately, in Wisconsin, we have a governor that is vetoing most of those initiatives, but there are so many other states where they have moved forward with legislation. We have to learn to trust and to move beyond and transcend some of the teachings of major religious, organized religion. Many are opposed to what they call gender theory. I'm opposed to theory too, because we're not a theory, we're a reality. And we're not going anywhere. Organized religion often, especially in the Christian tradition, looks to the Bible. And I wish we had time to go into more of a little catechesis, but just a couple of highlights. The cornerstone of that teaching often with regard to gender is the account in Genesis, where it's proclaimed that God created male and female. We've all heard that. And so God did. But you know, in that same passage, God also separated the water and the earth. But, you know, if we really take the Bible, you know, at its first word, then water and earth should stay apart from each other, right? Aren't those kind of absolutes? But then why do we have swamps and bogs and spillways and flooding? Why doesn't water and earth pay attention to what the scripture said? Well, it's the same about male and female. The vast majority of my world do resonate with those extremes, but the reality is that there's an amazing spectrum between those two. And our God is a God that loves diversity. If we're going to do literal interpretations of the Bible, then men should not be allowed to trim their beards. They should not be allowed to charge interest on any kind of a loan that's made. You should not be allowed to sell land, eat shrimp, or wear two different fabrics. We have to move beyond the limitations. Our scriptures can enliven our hearts, our spirits. But to get bogged down by them and limited is not the message that comes from the gospel. There is that basic command to love our neighbor as ourselves. There's no but after that phrase. We've got to get your butts out of the way. You know, when you look at the scriptures, there's the woman at the well. There's the whatsoever you do to the least. The Samaritan, tax collector. It goes on and on. The message is clear. We're called to love people as they are, not with qualifications. I take great consolation in the passage in Romans 8:38, that nothing can separate us from the love of God. Death, life, angels, demons, it just can't happen. Too many transgender people have been told by well-meaning relatives, parents, that somehow they're an abomination. We need to turn that around. We need to be those sentinels of love and care. The bottom line is, as a person of faith, just like Jacob in the Old Testament, I wrestled with God for 40 years, as so many transgender people do. Part of the reason that I helped found the Bay Area Council on Gender Diversity was to try to walk with others so they didn't have to wrestle quite so hard. And I've also had to grapple with this institutional church. Because even within the institutional churches, there are nooks and crannies and pockets of love, care, compassion. Sometimes the institutional churches get in the way. And I can say that with absolute confidence because of a very unique experience. When I retired, I left my faith tradition because I was so disillusioned and disenchanted. About 3.5 years ago, I began to look at the margins of that tradition and began to reclaim the foundational principles of that faith, the call to love one's neighbor, social justice, care, compassion, empathy. And as a result, last September, I had a very unique experience. Now, I want to share a photo with you of something that happened last September. If we can. Okay. I'm not going anywhere. I went to a gathering of people within a major denomination who have embraced the trans experience and have begun to work to welcome transgender people. Yes, that is not photoshopped. Through a weird set of circumstances, which I only attribute to the hand of God, putting me in a unique Thank you. I was given the opportunity, along with 3 other transgender Catholic women, to meet the Pope. The Pope has. Thank you. The Pope has begun over the past several years to send messages to the broader Catholic Church and Church Universal to be welcoming. There have been groups. The situation that led to this, at a conference that I was at of forward-looking Catholics, I met a priest who was pastor of a church on the outskirts of Rome and is a friend of Pope Francis. And in talking with him, within his community, he has a community of transgender sex workers whom he has been meeting or bringing to meet the Pope over the past couple years. And after meeting me and a few other transgender Catholic women, he said, "You have got to meet the Pope because he needs to know that it isn't just transsexual sex workers that are transgender." And so we had this opportunity. We were vetted ahead of time. We didn't, surprise the Pope. And no, we didn't have an in-depth conversation. But I can tell you, in this picture and in that moment, the twinkle in the Pope's eyes, his smile, his firm handshake, his invitation for us to pray for him, and his blessing for us, told us that despite what the broader church may say, there is hope. There are possibilities. Those possibilities present themselves when we open ourselves. My invitation to you, to all transgender people, is do not lose heart. Our God is so much bigger than organized religion. And when one opens one's heart and one's mind, God speaks, and amazing things can happen. Thank you for listening.